Government contractors are being told to prepare for this next conflict. NATO is reaching back into their Cold War past with the first major defense plans to take on Russia that we have seen since World War II, in the time and era in which countries embraced conflict against each other. It's being said that NATO is bracing for a widespread and multi-year conflict that will present itself at any moment in time. They say that plans are required at this moment in time to better the country and the group of countries' readiness and their logistics. They say that leaders are right now expected to take decisive action and get ready for what comes next. According to the reports, NATO is going to move back into their readiness planning, with leaders set to approve thousands of pages of secret military plans that will detail, for the first time since the Cold War at least, how the group will respond to a Russian attack. We're starting to see a lot of communication between military analysts and people who are looking over the information, as well as government contractors or military contractors, and they are all being told to get ready for what happens next. They say that what's going on with NATO right now signifies a fundamental shift, that NATO needs to be ready on a large scale with offensive and defensive plans larger than anything that has been seen in decades. They say that the conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a post-Soviet Russia will pale in comparison to what we're going to see come through in the next couple of months. With Europe's bloodiest war since 1945 continuing to go on at this moment in time, the NATO alliance is now saying that they must have each and every piece of their planning puzzle ready as they ready for Moscow and a conflict with Russia to erupt. This is a quote. "The fundamental difference between crisis management and collective defense is this. It is not we, but our adversary who determines the timeline." That's Admiral Rob Bauer, one of NATO's top military officials. He continued to say that we, as NATO, must prepare for the fact that conflict could present itself at any moment in time. He outlined what is called regional planning. NATO will give nations guidance on how to upgrade and get ready for a Russian conflict and soon to be a Chinese conflict. I'm going to give you another quote. "Allies will know exactly what forces and capabilities are needed, including where and how to deploy them," according to the NATO chief Stoltenberg, about the highly classified documentation that will, as it had in the Cold War, assign certain divisions and certain troops to defend different regions under NATO's control. They say that this formalizes a process that was triggered by Russia's annexation of Crimea back in 2014. At that moment in time, Western allied countries had to deploy combat troops to the east. Britain, Germany, Canada, a number of other troops moved their people to the Baltic states. They say this isn't a Cold War redo, but a fresh, hot war readiness. Many features are going to resemble NATO's military lineups that we have seen in the last couple of decades, but there are key changes that you need to pay attention to. Those changes are logistics, where they're putting people, how many nuclear weapons they're getting ready to use. Finland's accession to NATO last month doubled the country's border with Russia. It forced a more flexible approach, they say, when deploying troops to the Russian border and getting ready to fight that country there. The alliance, they warn, is no longer preparing to fight on a large scale. Instead, they are now getting ready to fight collectively, each individually and together, against the greater evil. Remember, those are the words of military strategists, analysts, reports. Those are not my words, that Russia is the greater evil there. "We don't envision the type of war that the Cold War was." I'm going to give you this other quote, "where allied forces would be hit simultaneously with large-scale packed attacks. They say that rather, we expect regionalized conflicts that are needed to be contained quickly. At the same time, they say that new developments, things like hypersonic missiles, the drones that are being used in kamikaze attacks, those are new challenges that must be adapted to. The good news, they say, is that when they talk about transparency on the battlefield with the satellites, the intelligence that they can gather, they see a maturing crisis. That was Lieutenant General Hubert, Shape's Vice Chief of Staff. He says, for Ukraine, we had all of these indicators quite in advance. Here we have an open admission that they knew Russia was going to move on Ukraine, and yet they still didn't tell the Ukrainian people or people all over Europe that a war was about to erupt right on their soil to give them a chance to move their finances, move their family, get to a safe location, make sound decisions. And that's what we're trying to do for you here. We see all of the indicators that this war is going to blow up into a multinational European Western conflict between the entire group of NATO, the entire group of allied countries for a free and open Indo-Pacific against China and against Russia. They say transparency is one of the reasons that NATO, contrary to other demands, does not see an immediate need to get ready for what's happening. The more troops you are amassing on the border is like having a hammer, they say. At some point, you want to find a nail. If the troops are massing, or if the Russian troops are massing on the border, that's going to make us nervous, they say, speaking of NATO. If we are massing troops on the border, that is going to make Russia nervous. And you're going to see this conflict erupt before either side is ready for it.